Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, is the best way to exit your highly appreciated real estate, cryptocurrency, or other assets subject to capital gains tax. Hey, I'm your host, Brett Swarts. Each episode, I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, business, and wealth minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. Hey, I'm really excited about our next guest. He is the host of Self-Directed Investor Talk, a very popular podcast and radio show. And he has had a vast background in real estate investing and currently serves as manager of real estate-focused private equity fund operating in Northern California. He's served as a publisher of the Bryan Ellis Investing Letter and is a contributor to Forbes, TheStreet.com, and Entrepreneur.com. He has a ton of knowledge to share with us today. Please welcome to the show with me, Bryan Ellis. Hey, Bryan, how you doing?
I am great, Brett. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. We're going to be talking about raising millions in capital in 30 days with Bryan Ellis and diving into all the secrets with that. And Bryan's going to be sharing with us. But in the meantime, or before we go there, would you give our listeners, getting to know you for the first time, a little bit more about your story and current focus?
Oh, sure, Brett. So I got my start in the real estate world a bit over 20 years ago, and really was at the time I was a software engineer, and was doing very, very well from it. Then my first daughter was born, and I realized I didn't want to work 90 hours a week anymore, and had to find some other way to make some money because I just didn't want to do that anymore. And kind of real estate was where I landed, single family real estate at the time, and I was really bad at it to start with, but ultimately kind of figured that out and built an email list to support that business. And out of that grew a really fairly large following. We had several 100,000 people on the email list at the time, and that sort of thing. And along the way, it turned out that a lot of the people who were my subscribers were interested in hearing about investment opportunities. And so we would occasionally put some of those in front of them. And through the years, I ended up learning what people really need to know about investment opportunities, what accredited or affluent investors, what they really need to know in order to make a good decision about participating in an investment opportunity or not. And that's really where I am right now, Brett. We do a lot of things. I publish a magazine called Self-Directed Investor Magazine. We are about to launch a new magazine called Accredited Investor Magazine that has a slightly different focus than the other one. But really, most of what I do today, Brett, is that people, whenever they need sponsors for syndications and other big investment projects, whenever they need to raise a bunch of money, what they'll do is call me up, ideally at the beginning of their project, but most of them, the first time they work with me, they wait until they're about 2 weeks before their drop dead date, whenever they really have to have money or they're going to, their project's not going to happen. That's when they call me. I write them a script, I write them a presentation, and generally try to save the day. So that's what I do these days.
Beautiful. And, I think we've all been given certain gifts, Bryan, and these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing and help to others. So I want you to maybe go back, transport yourself back to the high school days, maybe the university days. And I want you to think about maybe a strength or a gift that you believe you were given. And maybe what are one or two that you've been given, you believe, and how does that help how you help and bless people today?
That is a great question, and framed very differently than I've ever heard it framed before. And I actually wholly endorse and acknowledge the blessing aspect of this. I would point to two things. One of them is that even from a young age, while I was in junior high and high school, I had a certain clarity about being able to write well. I understood both the structure of how a lot of words ought to be put together, but also how individual sentences need to be put together, and how those words actually impact the listener or the reader. And so that was a gift and a talent that I was blessed with. And another one was understanding the cause and effect nature of the universe. I have this not so crazy, pretty intellectually well-founded belief that we live in a world of order. Our world was created with order in it, and order happens to be a fundamental characteristic of the way that I create my presentations today. Because what I've seen over time is that you can take a certain group of words and say them, and they are accurate and truthful and honest, and you get a certain result. Whereas you can take the same meaning, but you can say the same thing in a slightly different way and get a completely different response from your audience when you say it. And that is an indication of the fact that our brains are ordered to respond to certain stimuli in certain ways. And if we simply take a moment, and this is one of the gifts that I think I've been given, is that if you simply observe the way that people respond to the way you speak to them and to the way you write to them, what you'll realize is that even conveying the same information, if you do it in a way that is compatible with the way that they think and process information, you're going to get a lot farther, a lot faster. And so those two things, the ability to write well and the understanding of real cause and effect relationships as it occurs in the mind, those have been the real key differences for me.
Amazing. Yeah. So clarity to write well, and then to structure words well, to see order, understanding cause and effect, and then to be able to customize that, or the EQ to be able to say how someone's going to receive that. Is that a fair summary, Bryan?
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Awesome. So let's dive right into raising millions in capital in 30 days, right? So you get the call, hey, Bryan, I've got this $50 million, $20 million, $30 million project. I've raised and I've tapped out of my, the folks that I've connected with. Would you please help me? What is step number one, Bryan? Go.
So step number one, Brett, is that basically I have my client who has given me this a call. Usually they call me with a couple of weeks left. They're under the gun. They're going to lose this deal if they don't raise the money. And so maybe it's a $50 million project. They're $10 million short, and they got to do it quickly. And they are also convinced that their database is all tapped out. They've already gotten all the money out of it they possibly can. So what I do is I use those skills that I mentioned just a moment ago, the ability to write well and the ability to see cause and effect very clearly. And I ask them a million questions about their project so that I understand their project, its strengths, its weaknesses, everything that to them represents good about it, and everything that to them represents risk about it. And I do a little bit of additional research as well so that I have all the bases covered. But then I use that writing and logical thinking background to create a new presentation, like a new PowerPoint slideshow, and also a word-for-word script. That's the important part. I create an entirely new presentation for them. We record that presentation, and then I also write some emails for them to send to their database to get people to watch this webinar. And invariably, Brett, what we find out is that not only was their database not tapped out, but that there's more than enough money in that database to fund the rest of their deal, because we invariably raise the rest of the money that they need. Now, that works because I take the information that they give me and I restructure it in such a way and present it to their clients in such a way as to make it where their mind doesn't really have to process it so much. It fundamentally makes sense to them. And so what we've seen over and over again is that the client comes to us and says, my database is tapped out, and 3 days later, they've raised all the money they need from their database because of a presentation that we've created for them.
Love it. And by the way, you can learn more about Bryan Ellis by just texting him 678-888-4000. That's 678-888-4000. So they have a big problem. They're going to lose the project. They feel they're tapped out of their current list, their contacts. You're coming in like the capital doctor, right? Or the project doctor. And you're asking a million questions to understand their project and do some research. And you're going to try to, squeeze the juice out of the deal, and then also squeeze the juice out of folks. Not by squeeze, probably not a good word, but attract and unlock the stuff
Sure.
of the deal, of the capital raising. Is that a fair summary so far?
Yeah, it certainly is. That's
Okay,
exactly
that
what we
leads me
do.
to this question right here. Okay,
Sure.
so you said a million questions. Can we narrow that down, right? Because I think this is key here, asking the right questions, right? Perhaps even in the right order. But what are the three maybe most overlooked best questions that you ask to your clients to help unlock more of the opportunity?
You know, that's a really good question, Brett. But what I find is that the problem is not that they don't have the information that they need to have, nor is it that I ask them questions that lead them to realize things that they didn't know. It's that they don't understand the value of the information that they have and when it should be presented correctly. So to give you a quick example of what I'm talking about, if you look back in history, what you see is that all of the really famous stories, or the really famous events where a person is telling somebody else something, pretty much all of them are stories. Like they're all the fairy tales. There's Jesus with the Sermon on the Mount. There's all kinds of stories. Well, why? Well, it's because people remember stories. They remember narrative. What they don't remember is the details of what their professor lectured to them 30 years ago. All right. They don't remember specific narrow things like that. What they remember is the big picture. Where were we going with this idea? You know, what were they trying to get me to accomplish with this idea, or what did this fairy tale mean? Well, so that's what I do with my clients, Brett, is I take the information that they already know and restructure it and reorder it so that it's helpful and not contradictory to their goals. And so one way we do that is just about everybody, whenever they're doing a capital pitch presentation, they start they've got one thing in mind that's basically correct. And that thing that they've got in mind is that nobody's going to invest in this project without trusting me as the syndicator, as the sponsor. That's true. That is absolutely true. However, they don't care one little bit about you as a syndicator if they didn't know you previously. Okay. If they knew you previously, then your relationship is the currency. But if you're dealing with a new audience, they don't care about you at all until such time as they know that this deal is worth caring about. Well, despite that, what most syndicators and most project sponsors do is they start the presentation with a picture of all of the general partners of the project, all the people at the top of it. And they give a paragraph or sometimes more of background about each individual person running the project. Well, you know what? That's a great way to spend the first 5 to 10 minutes of the presentation on something that nobody cares about yet. So what do you do instead? Well, you reorganize your pitch as a narrative. This is what it is. This is what it's all about. This is what the vision is. This is why we're going to be able to do something with it that nobody else has been able to do. This is where the scary parts are. And oh, by the way, while you're expressing that narrative, what happens is that the people who are the general partners, the people who are running the show, they tend to pop up in relevant spots. So if somebody on the general partner list is a property manager, they're going to be running the property. Well, when we get to the part about why the people who managed the property before did a terrible job and why that leaves all kinds of opportunities for us now, well, that's a natural place to take 30 seconds, say something about the person who's in the general partnership role and their expertise in that area, because now it matters. Now it's relevant. But at the beginning of the show, that was just a wasted time and nobody cares. That's just one example. But there are many, many more like that where people just do everything out of order and they think that they are doing cause and effect. Like I mentioned, they think the premise is that the syndicator or the project manager is really important, and that's correct, but they apply that information in the wrong way. So all I do, shift everything around and make it make sense to your brain.
Hey, it's making sense to my brain, and you're doing a great job of breaking that down even right now. So
Great.
understanding the value of the information they have and presenting it well in the right order, taking the big picture of the story, right? Nobody really cares about, I mean, they're going to have to find out that you're a trustworthy person,
Sure.
and they'll figure that out. But they don't even
Sure.
want to figure that out unless the deal is even attractive. Is that a fair summary?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that, like, remember, at the core of it, everybody's asking, what's in it for me? And that is exactly what they should be asking for an investment opportunity. And what's in it for them ultimately is not that you're in it. So that's not where you start.
Excellent. So that's step one and step two. And then so step three is delivering this presentation. And what's maybe the best kept secret to now you get that interest, you get folks that are, now excited about the deal. Now let's maybe focus on conversion and or because you gotta do this in 14 days, 30 days. So what's the best kept secret there, Bryan?
So that one is very clear. The key to that is your positioning as someone raising capital. What I have observed over and over again is that my clients, they'll be raising 5, 10, 20, $50 million, whatever. And particularly the people who are a little bit newer at this, they do so almost apologetically. Like, we've got to raise $20 million. And by the way, the minimum is $100,000 per person. And sometimes we can accept $50,000 per person, depending on the situation. But we've got to raise $1 million or $20 million. And we've only got 10 of it. We're still 10 short. And we've got to close this out by 2 weeks from now. So if you are interested, go ahead and respond by doing whatever. Well, that's roughly the way that most people do it. I do it very, very differently. What I do is try to make the numbers very relatable and very, very urgency inducing. For example, somebody's raising $20 million. They're still $10 million short. And the minimum is $100,000, just like in the last scenario. Well, to me, what I think is they've raised 10, they need 10 million more. 10 million divided by 100,000, that's 100. Okay. So I need 100 investors. I don't need $10 million. I need 100 investors. And so how I would describe that differently is I would say, ladies and gentlemen, this is a project that has a budget of only $20 million. Now, you probably recognize that if you compare that to many other projects these days that actually have multi-billion-dollar budget levels, what we're talking about here is a really very small amount of money. Furthermore, 1/2 of the available spaces for this project have already been taken. We only have room for about another 100 people. Now, some people come to me and say, Bryan, I know the project minimum is $100,000. Could I invest more in this project? And the answer is maybe. I cannot guarantee that you can, because that is decided on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes we will accept more than the $100,000 standard investment from certain individuals, but that's case by case. I cannot promise that to you. What I can tell you is that we have only about 100 spots left. And right now there are 300 people on this webinar. So my encouragement to you is that you take this very seriously and respond right away by visiting the URL on your screen to set up an appointment with a member of the team to talk it through and make sure it's a good fit for you. So Brett, you can probably see in those two renditions of the same information that one of them is going to be far more powerful at driving people to make the next move right away.
Hey, I'm ready to sign up, Bryan. And I think you're absolutely right. By the way, you can learn more about Bryan Ellis by texting 678-888-4000. That's 678-888-4000. So let me see if I've encapsulate what you just said as best I can, right? And
Sure.
so instead of taking like maybe I would say a passive stance or apologetic stance or a kind of a nervous stance, right? Of, hey, we've only got so much time and we've got to raise so much. So if you want to, invest, then, just kind of go here versus, hey, no, this is actually a great opportunity. And in fact, we only have a budget of 20, which in context is, raising, big funds, big deals, millions, billions of dollars. Like, it's not actually that big if you consider that. of which already half of it's already been raised, and there's about 100 spots left, and 100,000 is our minimum. We may have an opportunity for some to invest more, but not sure. You have to be on a case-by-case basis. And right now there's about 300. You're creating some urgency on this webinar. So I would encourage you to go here right now. Is that a fair summary,
Right.
Brian? My first shot at this?
That's very, very impressively done, Brett.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So, all right. So now you've raised the capital, and we give, investors are happy. Your clients are happy. You're happy. What's the most rewarding part of what you do, Brian?
Oh, well, there are a couple of them. One of them, and I got to be honest, this is just a good stroke for my ego every time it happens, but it happens just about every time. And that is the short turnaround. Like, I'll get a call on one day, and the next day or the day after that, at worst, I'm spending the day working with that client. And then a day or two after that, we already have the webinar done and ready to, and turned around. And that day, like, the nature of the close that I give is such that people respond right away. I recall there's one client that I work with out in Dallas, worked with him several times now, actually. And I happened to be on site. This was pre-COVID. And I delivered their presentation live because they were on such a tight time frame that we didn't have time to record it in advance. I delivered their presentation live, and I closed the presentation out. It was about 40, 50 minutes long, something like that. And I was the only one in that room delivering it. But the room next to me was a conference room where basically all the management team was sitting. And I immediately heard like just uproarious applause. And I didn't know what was going on because I had no idea. Well, I talked to them. I got up out of the room and went next door, and they were just up in arms. And it turns out that they're one of their upper management folks who wasn't in the room and who didn't know what was going on had called in and said, "Guys, our appointment scheduling system has been hacked. Have you seen all of the appointments that have come in the last 15 minutes?" And this was not a joke. The guy really thought that had happened. So that's pretty gratifying, I'll admit.
That's really fun. That is really fun. So you're giving the presentation. One guy doesn't even know what's happening, and then the whole system's crashing because so many people are trying to book appointments. I think of the room like Rainmaker, right? I think of like who's what do they say? What's that movie? White Man Can't Jump, right? Where Wesley Snipes is on the basketball court, and they're like, who are you gonna pick? And it's Woody Harrelson. He's kind of walking down like, okay, that guy over there. They're not thinking much of it. Not that they're not thinking much of you, Brian, but then he comes in and then they just, they beat everybody, and it happens pretty fast. Suddenly. So that's really, really cool. And I could see, especially if you're meeting someone for the first time, right? And I always even think of like an emergency doctor too, right? It's like, it's happening and we got to bring in the specialist. We got to fly in the specialist, right? Who's got to perform this emergency surgery, right? Or this deal's going to die. And then you get to bring it back to life. Is that a fair summary, Brian?
That's a very fair summary. Most of the projects that I work on would not have otherwise closed without what we did.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it. So now let's talk about cost, Brian. So when you're coming in there, what does it take to get a Bryan Ellis to help them? And maybe it's case-by-case basis, of course, but what does that kind of generally look like, Brian?
Yeah, there's no case-by-case to it. It's $25,000 for one day. This is generally a one-day project for me. I spend typically 2 to 5 hours in the morning speaking with the person about their project, learning everything there is to know about their project. Then I spend the entirety of the rest of the afternoon and evening writing their presentation, creating their project, and then we get back on a if I'm in person with them, then we meet. If we're doing it remotely, then we get back together first thing the next morning, and I show them the presentation that I have made for them, and we go over every word because every single word is scripted. And at that point, my client gets to decide if they how they feel about what I have done for them, and if they feel good about it, then good. We go ahead and either record it or present it live. If they don't feel good about it, I give them their money back, shake their hands, and go the other way. And that pretty much never happens. But yeah, it's 25 grand to do this. It's a very, very quick turnaround, and it's been pretty consistently successful.
Awesome. No, that's worth every penny. And if you're help people raise, 100 grand, $1 million, right? That investor and when it closes the deal. I mean, yeah, that's fantastic. So,
yeah, and most of the people that contact me, they're not looking to raise 100 grand. They're like, and in fact, $1 million is kind of on the low end. Like I do some of those, but most of them are looking to raise 3,
my
5,
point was
10
that,
million.
like, even just raising 100 grand, I imagine that was what you raised, right? To me, that would pay for it, because that 100 grand, especially if it's leveraged, is going to be able to help purchase the deal, right? Or that investor. I mean, there's so many ways to get an ROI on that. Not that you would just do it for 100, but yeah, $1 million, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, yeah, exactly. So that's fantastic. Okay, great. So that's the cost. That's the
and to be clear, Brett, it's not. That is the per day fee, but it's very rare that this takes more than one day. Like it's not going to cost them 100 grand. It's going to cost them 25 grand once.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it. Right on. Perfect. With all that being said, we're running out of time. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Let's do it.
All right. So knowing what you know now, Bryan, if you go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget you would make sure to tell yourself to do?
Absolutely follow God and forget about everything else, and make sure that my moral and spiritual compass is straight above all else.
Beautiful. Love it. Couldn't agree more. Number one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
It would be Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. And it might be called Psychology, the Influence of Persuasion. I can never remember which, by a fellow named Cialdini. Great book.
Excellent. Writing it down right now. Best real estate deal you've ever done?
I guess I would point. You know what? I'm doing one right now, and I'll just tell you about it because it's fresh on my mind. It's a house deal, actually. It's just a house deal, but I'm getting it for just a little under 300 grand. It is right now worth conservatively 700, maybe 800, and it needs nothing, and it's all because of a personal relationship. So I'm going to buy that and then just resell it.
Love those kind of deals. Beautiful. Yeah. Number one negotiation tip.
Honesty and courage. Have a still spine. Be very, very clear and know what you absolutely must have, and don't waver.
Beautiful. What are you curious about right now?
Oh, spirituality. Much more so than anything in business. I spend a lot of time trying to make myself better, and so that's where my head is right now.
Absolutely. Also, I couldn't agree more. Also, given the state of the world, we're feel like we're in different times for sure.
Yeah, indeed.
Last question. So, and then we'll remind listeners where they can find you as well. So after all your success, Bryan, helping people raise millions in capital in less than 30 days, helping people to unlock deals that otherwise would have, been maybe fallen apart. And how do you stay centered in your values, and how do you stay encouraged to reach for new heights?
Oh, well, I stay centered in my values because that very thing is a core component of every single day of my life. I mean, I start off every single day teaching my young boys who are 6 and 7 about what I believe to be true. And we spend a lot of time talking about that, and with my wife also. And that's a daily part of our lives. If I can accomplish that with them, and we can keep what's most important front and centered to us, then to me that feels like a big win.
It's beautiful. Absolutely love it. And Bryan, for folks who want to get in touch with you, we remind them one last time where they can find you or connect with you.
Yeah, the best way to do that is just text me at 678-888-4000, 678-888-4000, and I'll be happy to respond to you and figure out what you need and point you more specifically from there.
Excellent. And I want to thank you for being on the show, Bryan. It's been a
My
real
pleasure.
pleasure to know you here. I feel like I'm a better thinker now, and maybe hopefully a
Good.
communicator, just a little bit, right? Just a tad better.
Good, good, good.
I want to encourage you to keep using the gift of clarity to write well, write copy, and help people, structure their communication and their deals to unlock more deals. And that's it. Thanks so much for being on the show. And I also want to thank our listeners for listening to the episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, is the best way for you to exit your highly appreciated business or real estate. Please go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com if you want to learn more about that. That's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Or if you're a business professional, commercial real estate syndicator, operator, you can also go to experttaxsecrets.com and learn how the Deferred Sales Trust can help you unlock capital as well for your next deal. Thanks so much for listening to the show. We appreciate